Education is often seen as the key to a country's future. But what does it mean to be educated in different parts of the world? The education systems of France, Quebec, and Benin have distinct features that reveal much about their societies and cultures. I had intriguing and informative conversations with 3 individuals in France, Benin, and Quebec about their education systems in each country. Today, I will discuss the things I learned from each conversation partner and the similarities and differences between each education system in the US's education system. My first conversation partner, Louise, is from France and provided very interesting perspectives on both education systems because she has spent time in America studying at Michigan State University. She explained to me that in France, there is an emphasis on standardized testing, especially le bac. Schools often do not have extracurricular activities at the school, but some students do participate in extracurricular activities outside of school, but they are usually limited to one activity because school is from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. There are both public and private schools in France, but there are fewer private schools than public schools. The curriculum is kept relatively the same in the country, and student-teacher relationships are very formal. Most teachers just read their lecture notes and leave without asking the class if they need any clarification. Louise explained that there aren't as many private schools as public schools because you must pay to attend private schools, but they are considered a better education than public schools. Emphasis is also focused on le bac because it decides if a student will graduate or not. If the student doesn't receive a 9 or above on the grading scale, they will have to repeat their senior year. In France, the schools are solely focused on academics, and with the schedule that the school has from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., it doesn't leave much free time for students. And also, since these extracurricular activities aren't at school, it makes it harder for students to find transportation and time for activities outside of school unless it is on the weekend. Louise also explained that she believes that in France, the student and teacher relationship is very formal because professors are there to simply do a job. She also added that their attitudes may differ from U.S. professors because in the U.S. we pay a lot to attend college, and our professors know that and are more than willing to help their students succeed. Office hours also are not offered in France. Louise was very shocked when she came to the U.S. and saw that professors offered office hours and had a genuine passion for helping students. And France scores fairly high on power distance, which can explain the formal student-teacher relationships. Professors often just read their notes and then leave the class after their lecture, whereas in the U.S., a low power distance country, professors offer office hours and will do a lot to help students succeed. In France, they score low on motivation towards achievement and success, which could explain why a majority of students do not overload their schedules with multiple sports and clubs, which is often seen in the US. France's culture values the quality of life and not standing out from the crowd, so overachieving isn't seen as necessary in this culture. In France, schools often do not offer sports, and kids must sign up for club sports outside of school, which often makes it difficult for kids to participate. France also scores high on individualism, which can explain the emphasis on standardized testing. France's culture emphasizes taking care of oneself and remaining independent, whereas in the US, much of the focus is on group work and teamwork. My second conversation partner is Clemence from Benin, and she explained to me that in Benin there is an emphasis on standardized testing. The BEPC is an exam that students have to take after junior high, and the BAC is an exam that students take to complete high school. There is even an exam that you have to take to graduate elementary school. Schools offer some after-school activities like self-defense and beading, but there are a variety of clubs offered outside of school. These out-of-school clubs do cost money to participate though, so that is a barrier to access for many students. There are both public and private schools in Benin, but there are fewer private schools than public schools. The curriculum is kept relatively the same for the country, and student-teacher relationships are very formal in Benin, but some teachers know how to balance professionalism and being kind to their students, especially in elementary classrooms. Similar to Luis's answer, Clemence explained that there aren't as many private schools as public schools because you must pay to attend private schools, but they are considered a better education than the public schools in Benin. Emphasis is focused on the BEPC and the BAC exam because it decides if a student will continue to the next level of schooling, and if a student doesn't pass the exam, they must retake the exam. In Benin, schools are focused on academics, and with the schedule that the school has, which is 7 a.m. to 7 or 5 p.m., it doesn't leave much free time for students to complete their homework and extracurriculars. Also, since extracurricular activities sometimes aren't at school, it makes it even harder for students to find transportation, unless it is the weekend. And in Benin, the teachers are not very friendly with students because there is a societal belief that a student will not learn hard enough if the teacher is too friendly. So most teachers are strict in hopes that their students will learn more. And Benin scores high on power distance, which explains the formal relationships with teachers. Students are expected not to question or challenge their teachers. Benin is also a fairly collectivist culture, which means that their culture places emphasis on collaborative learning activities. This differs from what I expected because Clemence explained that Benin has multiple standardized tests throughout a student's academic career, so I expected the society to be a bit more individualistic. My third conversation partner was Donovan from Quebec. He explained that in Quebec, the Test de Français International is a standardized test that tests a student's knowledge of their French language skills, and it is given to them their senior year of high school. Students must pass this exam in order to attend college. This is the only standardized test that Donovan had told me about that happens in Quebec. Many people do not have extracurricular activities that are at the school. They're mostly after school, and there are both public and private schools in Quebec, but most people go to public schools. The curriculum is kept relatively the same, but in between provinces there can be differences. And student-teacher relationships are very informal, but in the past, relationships between students and teachers were more formal. Donovan explained that although there are both public and private schools, many people choose to go to public schools because Quebec's education system is a good one. Private schools are very costly, and most people do not want to spend money when they can get an education through the government for free. Donovan also explained that the provinces can switch up certain elements of the curriculum depending on the provinces, which is similar to the US. Often private schools can switch up the curriculum a bit, or they can have faster paced curriculums because they do not have the same rules as public schools. Donovan explained that the people in Quebec often do extracurricular activities outside of school, and most schools do not offer sports. Instead, many of students volunteer for certain projects that they are interested in. Donovan also explained that student-teacher relationships are often informal because there is a new idea of how relationships should be between students and teachers. It has become a more relaxed environment where teachers will correct students for using the formal version of certain French words. Canada's culture scores low on power distance, which can explain the informal student-teacher relationships that are in Quebec. This differs from the student-teacher relationships that are present in Benin and France. Canada's culture also has a median score on uncertainty avoidance, which means that their culture is accepting of new ideas. This can explain why Quebec was open to having parents and people without teaching degrees to teach elementary students during a teaching shortage in Quebec. Canada's culture also has a median score on motivation towards achievement and success, which means that they are hardworking but they also value their free time. This can explain why some students do passion projects outside of school or club sports, whereas most students just focus on school. Now, I would like to discuss how these education systems compare with one another and the US. In Benin, Quebec, and France, schools do not offer sports. Instead, most children play club sports outside of school. In France and Benin, the student-teacher relationships are very formal, but in the US and Quebec, student-teacher relationships are very informal. Both Benin and France have high-stakes standardized tests that students take to determine their future. Both Benin, Quebec, and France have lunch breaks that are often more than 1 hour long, and their school day ends often around 5 o'clock or even as late as 7 o'clock. Similar to the US, Quebec is facing a teacher shortage, but to solve this, Quebec is looking to parents to help out in the classroom. In France and Quebec, when students attend college, they have a set schedule of classes that they are supposed to take each year. In the US, students have to go through a catalog of hundreds of classes to find the ones that they need for each semester. In Benin, it is the social norm for schools to have uniform dress codes. Some schools have up to 5 different uniforms that the student is expected to wear on specific days. In the US, some schools require uniforms, but a majority of schools do not require uniforms. And in France, college is free, but in Quebec, college is relatively cheap, ranging from $600 to $1,500. As the philosopher Aristotle once said, "The roots of education are bitter, but the fruit is sweet." No matter where we look, whether it's France, Quebec, or Benin, education is a long-term investment in the future. And though the paths may differ, the ultimate goal is always the same: to prepare the next generation for success. Thank you for listening to my presentation, and here is my works cited if any of you guys wanted to look into more information about any of the topics that I discussed today.